6:25 a.m. June 3rd, as the first delegates arrived for Vladimir Putin's Showcase Forum, black smoke was already climbing over St. Petersburg. 10 miles inland, buses pulled up to a convention hall dressed for the world's cameras. On the waterfront, a fuel terminal was burning. Both scenes belonged to the same morning, one scripted for months to tell every foreign investor that the war was far away and the sanctions had never bitten. The other flown more than 1,000 kilometers to arrive on cue. St. Petersburg was supposed to be untouchable. It sits far from the front, wrapped in electronic warfare, missile batteries, and gun systems stacked one behind the other, each meant to catch whatever slipped past the last. On paper, nothing small and slow survives that trip, and yet 3 columns of smoke stood over the city by the time the forum opened. Here's the one thing Russia never expected. Not a better missile, not a stealth aircraft, but arithmetic. That a wall of expensive, sophisticated defense could be beaten by the simple math of the swarm. This is how it cracked, layer by layer. Start with the distance, because it's the part that shouldn't be possible. These drones launched from Ukrainian territory and flew roughly 1,000 kilometers to reach the Gulf of Finland. More than 600 miles, New York to Chicago, on a one-way ticket. Nothing about St. Petersburg was built for that. The city sits so far from the fighting that its defenses were arranged for a threat coming from somewhere closer, or not coming at all. Here's the detail that decides everything. The machine making that trip cost a fraction of anything sent up to stop it. A long-range attack drone in this class is cobbled together from hobby plane parts and a piston engine, a warhead in the nose, asking the outside world for almost nothing. It is slow, it is fragile, and it kept coming. The whole question this video answers is how something that cheap crosses a wall that expensive. The answer starts with a lie whispered into its navigation. The first line of defense never fires a shot. Long before the port, the swarm crosses into an invisible bubble where Russia floods the air with false satellite signals. This is GPS spoofing, the quietest weapon in the whole belt. Real GPS satellites sit 20,000 kilometers overhead, and their signal arrives about as strong as a headlight seen from across an ocean. Faint, easily drowned out. A spoofer on the ground doesn't try to be clever. It shouts louder, blasting fake signals strong enough to bury the real ones. And a receiver built to trust the loudest clear voice swallows the lie whole. The drone's navigation suddenly believes it's somewhere it has never been. Its position jumps, smears, walks sideways toward open water. The autopilot bites down on that false fix and nudges the nose toward a place that doesn't exist, ready to fly the machine into the sea on the strength of a single lie. On most mornings, that's the whole story. The drone goes swimming and nobody hears the splash. Picture someone swapping every street sign in a city while you drive. Your engine works, your steering works, but every turn follows signs that are lying to your face. But the spec sheet leaves one thing out. This machine was running 2 navigation systems side by side the whole way in, comparing their stories. When the two disagree, the computer chooses. It throws out the satellite fix, ignores the phantom pulling it toward the water, and drops its nose toward the treetops to check its work against the real ground. That backup is inertial navigation, gyroscopes and accelerometers that feel every turn and gust and tally it up, asking nothing of the sky. Nobody can jam it, because there is nothing to jam. The oldest trick in navigation, counting your own steps down a pitch-black hallway, certain where the kitchen is because you memorized the house. Its one weakness is drift. Over 1,000 kilometers, tiny errors stack into real distance. That drift is why it had to drop low and read terrain, and dropping low pulled it out of the thin, easy air where it sipped fuel into thick air where the engine drank harder and its reserve began to shrink. It beat the first layer by descending into the exact space where the next one was waiting. Down in the weeds, the drone met the second layer, the point defense systems, truck-mounted radar and missiles built to swat whatever slips through. On paper, one of these eats drones for breakfast. A radar catches a contact, a missile screams off the rail and climbs in a heartbeat, and a slow fiberglass machine comes apart in a drifting cloud of scraps over the rail yard. Against a single drone, it's a clean, one-sided fight. Here's the detail that decides everything. One system can only track and shoot so much at a time, and it carries a finite rack of ready missiles. That's fine against one drone. It is a losing proposition against a wave. The commander on the perimeter stares at his scope and runs a map nobody on his crew wants to say out loud. More contacts crawling across it than he has missiles to throw. He fires. A real drone bursts over the yard. He fires again. Another gone. His crew works fast and clean, exactly the way they trained. And none of it matters, because while he tracks the first, 2 more slide past the rim of his coverage untouched. The rack empties faster than the sky does. This is the first hard arithmetic of the swarm. Every interceptor is expensive and finite. The factories build a handful a month, and Ukraine spent 2 years turning much of Russia's starting fleet into scorch marks on satellite photos. So the crews who still have a working system ration their missiles like a man counting the last rounds in a siege. But the drones don't come one at a time. They come by the hundreds, each built for a fraction of what it costs to stop it. Then comes the move that turns arithmetic into defeat. Salt the swarm with decoys. Cheap empty shells that light up a radar scope exactly like the real thing. The gunner can't tell the lethal drone from the junk until it's too late, and every missile burned on a maybe is one that won't be there when the real one shows. Think of one bouncer at a door with a dozen people rushing him. He grabs a few, the rest walk past. This is the economy of the whole war inverted. Ukraine builds drones by the hundreds, and Russia answers each one with something scarce and costly. And this port had a second problem the commander couldn't fix. Some of the systems that should have guarded it weren't there at all, pulled back to sit on the rooftops elsewhere when the brass got nervous about their own skyline. Like yanking the smoke detectors out of the kitchen to mount them in the living room, then acting shocked when dinner catches fire. A wall is only as thick as the bricks still standing in it, and a lot of this one was missing, so the math broke the way the commander knew it would. He emptied his ready rack, dropped the drones he could, and bought a reload gaps. Those long seconds while fresh missiles are hauled up and the sky goes wide open. The swarm rode straight through it. Past the missile layer, the wall had one thing left. Guns, automated cannon modules bolted onto the defense lines, radar and camera turrets that throw a stream of shells at anything low and small, and above them, attack helicopters fast enough to chase down a leaker. Here's what the guns really tell you. Russia is leaning on them because it already lost this fight at the missile layer. The point defense scene wasn't a strong defense working, it was a broken one, and somebody decided a robot gun was better than nothing. But the spec sheet leaves one thing out: reach. A gun module that only touches a target a kilometer or so out can't stop a drone smart enough to route around it. The swarm banked wide and slid clear. Going the long way wasn't free. Every extra mile of detour, every minute spent low and hidden, came straight out of a fuel reserve already stretched across 1,000 kilometers. The guns didn't take the lead drone down, they took its do-over. And this deep, a second pass was the only thing that could have saved it. Then, from above, the helicopters. Airframes worth more than the entire swarm they were hunting, built to kill armor on the open plain, now chasing machines with the wingspan of a hang glider. A sharp crew can drop several drones in a single pass with nothing but the cannon, but the gun camera shows the crew a low, glaring picture that washes out under its own muzzle flash and freezes at the worst moment. Hunting one small drone against broken forest through a sensor like that is like spotting a single moth against a cluttered backyard through a fogged phone camera at noon. And every hour that helicopter burns fuel chasing $50,000 drones, somewhere an accountant is smiling. One drone tumbled under a clean burst. The gunner swung on to the next, the lead, and lost it in the glare. The one that mattered slid underneath him through the noise, and he never saw it. 2 minutes to impact, the lead drone dropped toward the tank farm with no operator, no radio link, no GPS, nothing the Russians could grab onto, steering by a single camera in its nose. And that eye was running out of things it recognized. This is machine vision guidance. The drone watches the ground against satellite pictures loaded into its head before takeoff and drives itself the rest of the way in. There was nothing left for the spoofer to fool because the drone had quit asking the satellites anything at all. Picture a tourist who memorized a photo of the building before leaving the hotel. You scramble every signal in the city and he still walks to the front door. The catch is he has to recognize the door. Right now, the door was buried in smoke, boiling off the far end of the farm where an earlier drone had already punched a tank open. The lens that expected rows of silver tanks found a churning black column shot through with fire. The lock broke for one heartbeat. 3 ways out, all bad. Climb above the smoke and hand itself to the guns, orbit on fuel it didn't have, or find the target through the mess and commit. So the computer stopped hunting for the whole picture and hunted for hard edges instead. The rim of a single tank breaking the smoke line, anything solid to anchor on. It found a tank rim, it locked. The range counter fell, the nose dropped, threading the last gap, and the warhead buried itself in the side of the tank. The tank went up, flames sheeted across the top, found the next one, then the one past that. A fresh black column erupted over the port beside the one already standing, and at a third across the harbor, where another drone in the wave had found its own tank. 3 pillars of smoke over the city where Russia had promised the world there'd be none. Now step back and look at the whole wall. Electronic warfare that a backup compass walked straight through. A missile layer that ran out of missiles before the sky ran out of drones. A gun line so obviously a patch that its very existence admits the missiles already failed. Every layer was real, expensive, sophisticated, and every layer was beaten by the same thing, volume that costs almost nothing to produce. They built a wall that couldn't be crossed, and it was crossed anyway. That's the one thing Russia never expected. Not a weapon it could out-engineer, but a math problem it can't outspend, because the cheap side of the equation is winning, and the target was no accident. A fuel terminal is war revenue burning on the waterfront, part of a 2026 pattern of Ukrainian strikes gnawing at Russian energy from the inside. The timing was the message. 10 miles from the smoke sat the St. Petersburg Forum, Russia's own Davos, the stage where Putin would tell a hall full of foreign investors that the sanctions never stung and everything was normal. Behind every shot of that speech stood a black column no camera in the city could crop out. The layered wall is supposed to be the answer to the drone age. This morning it wasn't. If you want to see how deep Ukraine can really reach, the video on screen right now shows exactly that. Go watch it next.